3. Come fly with me is that music. Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with TFE here at the Beach Street Yacht Club. We're back in San Francisco. I guess we were here last week as well. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. David Robinson out in Honolulu, Denise Peterson, Philip Friedman, people all over the U.S. joining us for our weekly Yacht Racing News Roundup. I hope this is properly framed here. I've got my coordinating producer, Julia Vedekind, our live studio audience here again today. Let's get right into it. The first piece of news is that the protocol governing the 36th America's Cup, Grant Dalton says the protocol is basically done. Or so Mr. Dalton said in a newspaper article today. Duncan Johnstone writing on the stuff.co.nz website, which is the Fairfax news service. Peter Burling here with Grant Dalton when they were touring the Cup around New Zealand over the last month since they won. They're partners with Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron and Emirates Team New Zealand in doing the protocol. Is the Yacht Club de Sicilia, the Club Nautico della Vela Sicilia, represented here by Patrizio Bertelli, not to be confused with Ernesto Bertarelli, who was the Swiss challenger and then defender, the only team to win the Cup on the first go, and they won it from Team New Zealand in 2003 in Auckland. So that was a good effort by Ernesto Bertarelli, but this is Patrizio Bertelli, the CEO of Prada. This is with his Commodore of his club, Agostino Randazzo, and then the Commodore of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, Steve Mayer. Also having a lot to say about the next Cup in an article this morning in... let's see if I can find this. In Classic Boat Magazine, Bruno Trublet, our longtime friend from France, who really was the founder of the Louis Vuitton Cup in 1983, he's in an article here saying that, speaking about the Bermuda event, Trublet said, "We don't want a video game kind of boat racing where the greatest sailors on earth, Sir Ben Ainslie, Jimmy Spithill, or Franck Camas, have no chance. And while they race, we want to see their faces, not RoboCops covered with goggles, helmets, and mics." And of course, Trublet, who helmed the boats in 77, 80, and 83 for the French challenges for Marcel Beek, the head of Bic Pens, the late, great Marcel Beek. But he went on to say quite a bit about what the next Cup should be. And of course, he says, that is why I'm so critical of Russell Coutts, willing to transform the myth, that is the myth of the America's Cup, to a vulgar 2-year sailing circuit. Now the Cup is in New Zealand. The Kiwis will obviously fix it. They know how to do it. It is not a matter of boats, monohulls, or cats. It is a matter of respect to all those people who fought for the pride of their countries over the long and storied history of the America's Cup, or so said Bruno Trublet in that article in Classic Boat magazine, the online magazine that's running today. So what is the status? What do we know so far? What's been promised? What's been made public? Because again, the protocol is not out. It won't come till next month at the latest, or at the earliest rather, sometime late in September we expect. What we do know, and what has been widely announced, is that it will be in Auckland in 2021. Now whether it's, as we said on last week's show, raced outside in the Hauraki Gulf, where the Cups were raced in 2000 and 2003, or inside here where the Louis Vuitton Pacific Cup was raced in the hiatus leading up to the 2010 catamaran multihull race in Valencia, Spain, between Golden Gate Yacht Club and Société Nautique Genève. There was some racing in here that was quite popular in the old IACC boats, the monohulls that were used in the Cup from 92 until just recently. Or will it actually be further inside? Will it be here off, where some people think it'll be off this commercial port, right in the up close against the shore, or even over here where there is Princess Wharf, which is a popular tourist destination, big hotel and a nice viewing area as well. But the water, frankly, is a bit restricted. So that's one thing. We do know Auckland. The details will be forthcoming. And of course, part of it is where they're going to base as many as 12 teams, maybe more. Second thing that becomes clear, including in this article that ran this morning, by Duncan Johnstone's article, it's that there will be a return to a strong nationality rule. Remember, there never was, as Dennis Conner said in his podcast a couple weeks ago, there never really was a nationality rule until Andy Rose sailed, the American, our good friend from Newport Beach, sailed for Australia 1 for Alan Bond in the 1977 Cup against who? You remember who? Ted Turner and Courageous and Gary Jobson calling tactics against Andy Rose. And New York Yacht Club said, boy, we'd better do something about that, or otherwise Americans are going to go sail with non-American teams and help them win the Cup. So, I was involved in helping write that rule for the 1980 America's Cup, and it was not really, to be fair, it was not a nationality rule, it was a domicile rule. It was a residency rule. And it was easy to circumvent, because all you had to do under the rule was move to the country, establish a, quote, principal place of residence or a domicile. You get a cell phone bill, a gas bill, have an address. So it became an expensive means for the teams to make people nationals just by moving them to, say, Switzerland, even though they were sailing all over the world in other events and getting ready to sail in Auckland for the 2003 Cup, for example. So there will be a stronger nationality rule. I predict it will be an 80% rule based on Olympic eligibility. If you're Olympic eligible for New Zealand or Australia or the U.S., you'll be eligible to sail for an America's Cup team representing a club from the respective country. Constructed in country rule is another big issue, and again in this article this morning, Grant Dalton has promised a much stronger constructed in country rule in line with the precepts of the deed of gift, or what many of us think are the requirements of the deed of gift, the spirit and the letter. And that constructed in country rule has been relaxed by Golden Gate Yacht Club and Russell Coutts, DBA, the America's Cup Event Authority, and that has resulted in a lot of angst, because basically the boats for the last Cup in Bermuda were built in New Zealand at Core Builders. Now, a couple of them were built otherwise, but you could build almost all of your boat at a boat building facility anywhere in the world and then only build the the few meters of the bows in your home country and snap them on, the breakaway sections of the bows. So that rule is going to be tighter. We know that. The protocol will be issued. We'll know everything, we think, by the end of September. That's what Grant Dalton has again promised. He says he's on track, that it's basically done, and we shall soon see. But the bottom line, he says, is to give certainty and stability to the teams. And I agree with him, and I hope they will do that. I think that's their overall driving force. And if they do, as I said at the top of the show, I think there will be fully 12 teams, maybe more, in Auckland in 2020 and 2021 for the Cup, for the Louis Vuitton Selection Series, or whatever the sponsor's name is, and for the Cup itself in the first couple months of 2021. Of course, there'll be training lead up to that. And arguably the most interesting first step is going to be when the Volvo boats do their Auckland stopover in late February and March of this coming year in 2018. And I think you'll see a lot of America's Cup interest because, of course, Peter Burling sailing with one of the teams, Blair Tuke, and another one of the Emirates Team New Zealand cyclors sailing on Volvo boats, and they will be there for the stopover, which I think is going to give the Cup and the Volvo race a huge shot in the arm come next February and March. What kind of boats? That's the big issue that's on everyone's minds. Will it be a foiling multi-hull like we've seen in the last two Cups here in San Francisco and in Bermuda? Will it be a planing monohull like, say, a TP52 on steroids? Maybe it'll be a bigger 65 or 70 foot version of a TP52, which are the popular boats sailed in the Super Series in the Med, like Allegre here, the British boat. Or will it indeed be a foiling monohull? This is what I think it's going to be for a number of reasons. First, Patrizio Bertelli of Prada has said that we will be the challenger of record, but we want it to be a monohull, and he also loaned money or gave money, contributed money to Emirates Team New Zealand. So I think he has a fair bit of clout with this decision, and he has said all along he wants a monohull of some sort. Another thing, and I wrote an article about it earlier this week, yesterday or even Sunday on Sailing Illustrated, is do you know who Team New Zealand's chief designer is? It's Guillaume Verdier, the esteemed French yacht designer, who has also been tasked by Volvo to come up with the concept for a foiling monohull for the next edition of the Volvo, the 2019-2020 edition. He is also the designer of Jim Clark's Comanche, the 100-footer that Ken Reed's been steering and breaking records all over the world. He's part of the famous yacht design house in France called VPLP, which actually played a big role in designing our trimaran for the 2010 Cup. And I think you will see, because of Mr. Verdier's influence, I think you're going to see something like this concept boat for the Volvo. You'll see something like it, whether it's got a swing keel, I don't know, but it's going to have some kind of, I think, foil-assisted monohull. So I won't be surprised at all if that's what it comes to. One other telling but subtle indication in my Tea Leaves article that I mentioned the other day is that Grant Dalton, at his valedictory press conference, at the final press conference after they had won in Bermuda, said, I'd like to see the America's Cup and the Volvo Ocean Race and even the Vendée Globe come together and be cooperative and help each other in promoting and drawing interest to the sport. And if that's the case, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see an Imoca 60 or a Volvo 65, a swing keel, foil-assisted. Julia, do you agree?
I do.
You do. Okay, so that's my little bit on what I think it will be. Time will tell. They haven't made the decision yet, but they have a couple different teams working on it, and we'll know in a month or so what is to be the next boat as well as the protocol. This is the scene in Auckland I don't know if this is 2003. The photo said 2003, which is, of course, when Alinghi won, when Russell Coutts won. But this may be a photo from 2000. It may have been when I pulled it off Google this morning, Google Images. But nonetheless, whether it's 2000 or 2003, I think you're going to see a return to this kind of festival of sailing in Auckland for the next America's Cup, because every indication is that the Kiwis are doing a good job pulling this protocol together, going back to what the traditional cup looked like and what it worked well over those many years, especially the modern history since, say, 1958, but also coming up with a boat that will be fast and interesting and stimulating for young sailors, not, an old 12-meter pounding through the water at 8 knots. So much for the America's Cup and really what is the big news of the day. And it's not that the news, that there's anything revealing in all that. Some of you will have known most of that, but a confirmation of what we at Sailing Illustrated and others have been suggesting is what's going to happen. Also on the website, and I always say this, but thanks again for the fantastic support. We've had our biggest week ever except for the America's Cup, and it continues to grow dramatically, our weekly readership, particularly among non-Americans. I mean, among Europeans, Australians, Kiwis, and Asians, and we appreciate very much the wide breadth of interest and support and viewership, readership for our now only, 5-month-old, not even, sailing website. Let's see, this is 4-month-old, I guess. May, June, July, August. Sailing Illustrated website, sailingillustrated.com. The Volvo is on a non-counting leg called Leg 0. The boat sailed in the Fastnet race and around the island race and up in England. And now they're racing down to Lisbon. Mapfre, the Spanish boat, the red boat, has had a glorious string of races. And it looks like they're winning again. Their navigator has gotten them out to the west of the fleet a little bit, and they've picked up some new northwesterly breeze, and they're now in the Bay of Finisterre, cruising at quite a great rate of speed compared to the other boats, which are in lighter air closer to shore. And it looks like they're going to win this leg as well to Lisbon. And then after Lisbon, they will race around the end of the Iberian Peninsula to Alicante, Spain, which is on the Mediterranean, in the western end of the Mediterranean, where the race will start. That is the Volvo Ocean Race 2017-2018 will start in October. And as you have seen, we've been giving that extensive coverage. We think not only with the America's Cup sailors, but the incredibly close racing we've seen in these boats, we think is going to produce another stellar series, and we're looking forward to covering it. I hope you are enjoying the coverage as well. This is an article about Grant Dalton squeezing some money out of the government so he can keep paying his team's salaries, $5 million. It's an interesting read, no surprise that I posted on Saturday. Also, the bigger news over the weekend was from Aarhus, Denmark, where they're running the test event for next year's Sailing World Championship. The Sailing World Championship is a world sailing event put on in the mid-cycle, midway through the 4-year quadrennium, the Olympic quadrennium, and they bring all the Olympic classes together and have a joint world championship, if you will. This was a test event, and one of the classes, the NACRA 17, they had to cancel the last day of racing, the so-called medal races, because the boats, the foiling, these are new foiling catamarans. The NACRA 17 was used in Rio, but they've basically redone the boat completely. And I think, and Paul Henderson and others think, that they've done a big disservice to the sport because they've rushed this through, paid no heed to world sailing regulations and even IOC precepts that say you have to establish the class 5 years in advance of when it's going to get used in the Olympics so it can have worldwide distribution, it can have a stable rule, it can have stable equipment widely available, and not just a few boats available to the rich countries, frankly, which is part of what's going on. So they had to cancel the race because of problems with the foiling mechanism, the cassette into which the dagger foils go and go up and down. The class manufacturer says they're going to have that all fixed and parts retrofitted to the existing boats, by their World Championship, which is in 2.5 weeks' time. It's a big ask, and I think you're going to see more problems from the NACRA class. Don't get the idea that I'm against the NACRA or against foiling catamarans like some people have and have written about. I'm all for it. I want to see it happen, but I want to see it happen in an orderly way and not in a way that is advantageous to the wealthy nations who can afford to have multiple boats and campaign what is becoming an increasingly expensive and difficult class because of all the retrofits, and not just the boards, but the masts. And it's been a bit of a fustercluck over the last couple of years since this class, since the Rio Olympics. And I hope it comes good. We're pulling for them. We hope so, but it's difficult. There was some very good news for the U.S. sailing team in Aarhus at this test regatta last week. The U.S. sailing team did, I think, had the best regatta they've had on the international circuit of these build-up regattas to any Olympics in a couple quadrennium. First of all, in the laser radio class, Erika Reinecke, who is from Florida, but sails a lot up here in the Bay Area. She gets some sponsorship from St. Francis Yacht Club and others up here in the Bay Area. She won the silver in the laser radial, so congrats to Erika. In the men's 470, a veteran team of Stu McNay, who's from Providence, Rhode Island, and Dave Hughes, who's also from Florida, they won a silver in the 470. They're a veteran team. They were in Rio, had a disappointing Rio Olympics, but they're members of the national team and really have high hopes that not only will they do well in this next Olympics, but also help lead, bring along, inspire the other younger members of the team under the overall leadership of Malcolm Page, the Australian who has been put in charge of Olympic sailing by U.S. Sailing. And this appears to be a good first start. So I am at least, I'm heartened by what we've seen. And particularly from this team, a couple gals from the Midwest, Steph Roble and Maggie Shea, who are match racing champions, collegiate champions. Steph is a world champion in a class. I'm not sure what class she won a world's in, but they won the bronze. That's the third place, of course. The bronze medal in the 49er FX. That's the women's skiff. And I've actually got a video that Steph and Maggie did, or that U.S. Sailing did with them, that I think is worth watching. Let's take a look at it. There's no audio in the early part of it, but I think you'll enjoy this.
Steph Roble, and this is my awesome crew, Maggie Shea. We've been sailing together in multiple different classes, mainly match racing for the last 5-6 years, and we decided to make the jump into the Olympic game and sail the 49er FX early this January. It's been an awesome spring and summer so far. We've been really focusing on just getting up to speed in the boat and focusing on boat handling, training against Kate and Caroline, our American training partners, and with our coach Willie. So yeah, it's just been a really focused spring and summer on all that, and we're excited to be in regatta season now.
All right, Maggie, you are not a skiff rookie, unlike your driver. What's it been like to sort of kind of come together as a team on this platform as opposed to a match racing that you've done before?
It's been a lot of fun. We carried a lot of the lessons that we learned in match racing even into this boat, but it's just faster and a more fun platform, and it's been more challenging. The whole fitness aspect of it has been really fun to try to develop, and we've been having a ball. So I was lucky to learn a lot from the several skippers I sailed with last quad, and it's been so fun to apply that with Steph in a different setting than before.
Steph, you've done a lot of pro sailing since you were an All-American at Old Dominion. You've been a world champion. What pulled you into Olympic sailing specifically?
Well, it's a dream that I've had my whole life since I was young in Opties, and it just kind of came at the right time when Maggie said, "Hey, let's do this," and she has a lot of great experience in the boat, and it was the right time.
I think this video is a little long, so I think we'll leave it at this point. But I like to see these kinds of videos coming from U.S. Sailing. If you're doing sailing videos, they should be no longer than a Beatles song. 2.5 minutes, intro, reprise, bridge, reprise, out. And if you get much longer than that, people lose interest. But nonetheless, It's a great video, great gals. I'm really pleased to see them coming along. And three medals at Aarhus at this test event, I think bodes well, very well, for U.S. sailing. Congratulations to all concerned. While we're here, and I've got Julia's phone for a minute, David, we mentioned David Robinson. We got a good crowd on here again today. Thank you. Jack Everett says hi from Chattanooga. Bill Wingrove in Tampa. Bill, you've been a stalwart. We really enjoyed getting to know your young sailor from Davis Island Yacht Club who sailed in the Gov Cup and in the Worlds. Really, Greiner Hobbs. Nice to get to know him and his team. Great young people. A lot of fun. Philip Friedman is watching with the UC San Diego sailing team. Philip, thank you, down in San Diego. And you mentioned about 15-year-old San Diegan Jack Egan, who's had a stellar summer. He's won a bunch of, the list is too long almost to mention, but he also was, I think, just second in the Club 420 Nationals, which is a huge event. There's, I think, 100-plus boats in the 420 Club Nationals, and Philip says that Jack Egan was second in that. Birgit Green, good morning to you from New Zealand. Birgit Green, an old friend from BMW. Well, she's not old, but she's a longtime friend from Munich and BMW days. And she is now the wife of Russell Green, who is the rules advisor for Emirates Team New Zealand, the esteemed rules advisor who happened to be in Newport Beach a couple weeks ago with Birgit watching the Match Racing Worlds because Russell was the chief judge. Welcome to you, Birgit, and everyone else that's joined us this morning. Thank you. The big news coming up in the coming week is the J-Class World Championship hosted by New York Yacht Club in Newport, Rhode Island. I hope to get there myself. We've got some family things in Michigan to tend to this coming weekend. And if that all goes well, then I'll get to Newport and get a look in at this, what I think is going to be, frankly, with all due respects to the America's Cup in Bermuda and Team New Zealand's win, this I think is going to be the regatta of the year. First time that there's really been a world championship of this J-Class. And remember, these 130-foot boats, the elegant era of the America's Cup, when the J-Class were raced in 1930, 34, and 37 in Newport, Rhode Island. Commodore Harold Vanderbilt won all three. But now there's a resurgence, a renaissance of these J-boats, UK, Europe, and the US, and they're all coming together for the first ever World Championship in Newport, starting Monday with a practice race and an opening ceremony and so on. It's a yacht club event, so those of you who might be in Newport or in the Northeast expecting to go to the events, probably not going to be able to see the events, that is the shoreside events, but the sailors will be in the candy store, they'll be in the Clark Cookhouse and all of the bars up and down Thames Street and up and down the wharves, and it should be a great atmosphere in Newport, Rhode Island next week. There's racing, practice race Monday, racing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it says first warning signal. I've had a quick look at the sailing instructions. They can race a couple races a day. They will race normally outside, out in Rhode Island Sound, where the traditional America's Cup race course was, not nearly as long races. But if the conditions outside are gnarly, if it's windy and rough, they can also race north of Newport Bridge. And we'll keep you posted. We've got Michelle Almeida there taking photos, as are other of the top yachting photographers. And as I say, I think this will be a fabulous event in Newport next week, maybe the regatta of the summer, if not the year. Also going on, I don't have a slide, but I mentioned it in an article about Airlie Beach Race Week down in Queensland in the Whitsunday Islands in the northeast corner of Australia. Next week is the Hamilton Island Race Week, which I've been to, and I tell you what, it's one of the great sailing festivals, great sailing events, onshore and on the water, anywhere in the world, and it's been going on, sponsored by Audi and run by just a great group of the family and a great group of friends at Hamilton Island Yacht Club up in, Hamilton Island in the Whitsundays, Great Barrier Reef. So that's what's going on next week. We'll be covering all of that. I want to close by saying, and thanks to many of you who wrote and I think enjoyed, if not loved, this recognition. Time Magazine it does from time to time, no pun intended, they do a recap of what ran on their cover 50 years ago or 75, however long. And 50 years ago this week, Bus Mossbacher, who won the Cup in 62 and then again in 67, or won it in 67, I should say, on Intrepid. And he is featured, and this was the cover story, and this is before he won in 67. This is this time of year, and the match was, as usual, in September. And it's an indication of how, in fact, the article says, it's a contemporary article, says this is an indication of how sailing was taking hold in the U.S. in the 60s. I have a theory about that. I think it was JFK and the Kennedy family being seen in Look magazine, Life, and Saturday Evening Post on their Sunfish, on their Weano Senior. He even had a starboat at one point. Jack Kennedy did. But nice coverage. Dacron fiberglass help. Lots of post-war income and the surging economy in the U.S. But it would be nice to see a similar resurgence, I guess, of sailing as we saw in the 60s. And I've got some ideas, and we'll be writing about that in the ensuing weeks. Got a very nice letter to the editor, not even on my personal email. It came into Sailing Illustrated. George Hinman, past Commodore of New York Yacht Club, a longtime friend, said, "I hope that those sailors who have won the America's Cup have as much appreciation as we did crewing on Intrepid in 1967. Best skipper, Bus Mossbacher, best designer, Olin Stevens, and a crew that made it happen." And it was a class act. David Elwell, another longtime friend and past Commodore of New York Yacht Club, was on that team, and probably some others that you all know. Thanks, Jory Hinman, for sending that letter in. And with that, we'll wrap up today's show, almost on time. The 30 minutes goes in a hurry. Thank you to all of you who joined, and we'll do it again next Tuesday, same time, 11 o'clock Pacific time. Here, probably I'll be in Michigan, maybe in Newport, Rhode Island, but we'll do Tuesdays with TFE. Thank you for joining.